Are you kidding me? I just gave you thousands of dollars for my flight training and now you're telling me I have to buy all this other stuff? That's how I remember feeling when I was in flight training. I had two different flight schools because I moved during my flight training, and both of them said that I had to buy these study books and these plotters and all the things from their own flight school that they had, of course, marked up in price. Little did I know that I really didn't have to do this, and that I could have even went to Amazon or a older student and found a year old version of these items for much cheaper. And so when you start off flight training, it can get overwhelming because so many people out there know you're willing to spend money for your dream, and they can really take advantage of that. So that's why I created a list of our recommended products list, and it breaks it down into the categories that you only the things you need for ground school, only the things you absolutely need for flight school. And then I also have categories for things that you don't necessarily need, but might help you a lot. They make your life easier as a pilot. And then also one more category for things that you definitely don't need, but can be really fun and maybe add some fun to your flying. And we also have a section on exclusive discounts only for part-time pilot listeners. So I've been trying to work with companies that I really like their products. I've tested their products myself over the years, and I use them myself, so they're very, very good. So I've tried to work with them to try and get some discounts for our students. That list is growing. I think we have 3 or 4 coupon code discounts in there, so go check that out. You can go to our website, parttimepilot.com, click on students and recommended products, or check out the link in our show notes. Hello, hello. Welcome in to the Audio Ground School podcast. I am your host, Nick Smith. Today we're going to continue on our Checkride prep episodes, but we're going to do, I think I mentioned last week that we were going to get into the practical part of your Checkride a little bit more. But before we do that, I think it made sense. I had previously recorded a mock Checkride with a student, so I think it makes sense to kind of round off our episodes on the Checkride oral exam by playing that mock Checkride oral exam that I did with a student. So we're going to play that today, and then next week we will get into sort of the practical exam stuff. So that's what we're going to do. At least that's the plan right now. It could change, of course. But before we play that, I do want to talk about a couple things coming up, and one of them is our spring scholarship. So if you guys know, we do 4 scholarships a year. 3 of them are $1,000 that we donate, and those are just for members of our online ground schools. Okay. The 4th one, we started this last year in the spring. I start off a GoFundMe donation of $1,000, and then we try to get people to donate, and we try to get that as big as possible. Last year, just by small donations from our followers and members, we got up to $5,000. Now, we haven't had any small donations yet, so hopefully we get some of those. But what I've been doing this year is trying to get some corporate sponsorships. So I donated $1,000, and then I've been working with some companies, and we've gotten so far up to about $3,400 worth of that. So 34% of the way to our goal of $10,000. I'm still working on getting more, but I need your guys' help now. Okay, so we got a few weeks to go. If you can donate $1, $5, $10, $100, whatever, more than appreciate that. If you can't, no worries, but please do me a favor and share the GoFundMe link, because I know there are people out there that are looking to donate, to give back to a good cause, and I think that's what this is. So again, we give out I don't keep any of this. That's why I use GoFundMe, for the transparency. We give it all away in the scholarships. The only people that get money out of this is GoFundMe. They take like 3% or some fee like that, right? But I do it for the transparency. That's okay. We lose 3%, whatever. I do it for the transparency, and so that we can give it all away, and everyone knows how much was collected and all that stuff. So I don't keep a dime of it. It's a really good cause. So please, please, please share that GoFundMe link. But I do want to announce one more thing that's aligned kind of with our campaign to do this spring scholarship, and that is we got a new donation from my favorite aviation headset brand, Core Headsets. So Core Aviation, they make headsets, and they were my first ever purchased headsets. I was sick and tired of using the sweaty, rental ones at my flight school that went out on me a couple times. So I got my own, and they were affordable enough for me when I was a poor student pilot to get my own pair of headsets. And they're still very affordable. You can get them under $200, and now they're giving our followers, our listeners, 20% off until May 10th. So the coupon code is part-time pilot 20. No spaces, just part-time pilot 20 at Core Headsets, I believe, coreheadsets.com. Let me just check this right here real quick for you guys. Yeah, coreheadset.com. I'll put that in the show notes though. But yeah, so part-time pilot 20, you can get additional 20% off. I highly recommend them. That pair of headsets I got 8 years ago, I still have. They still work. So not only are they affordable, but they're long-lasting, and they're good people because they just donated $500 to our scholarship. So I couldn't recommend them more. So check that out in the show notes. Please share the GoFundMe. And without further ado, let's get to today's episode where we're going to play that mock Checkride. So let's get to it. All right, so welcome in, everybody. We're going to do a mock Checkride with Alex. What's up, Alex? So, Alex, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us when your Checkride is, kind of what, whatever you want.
My name's Alex. I started flying October 15th of last year. So I've been about 5 months now. I got about 43, 44 hours, I think. And I've got my Checkride scheduled for tomorrow. The weather doesn't look so great. It'll probably get rescheduled for a different day. I'm feeling ready. All the flying stuff feels really good. Stuff I feel pretty confident on, but there's a lot to it. So you're going to give me a little test and see how I do.
Awesome. Very cool. And then we were talking about this just a second ago, but you do a lot of skydiving. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, do a lot of that. So I've been around aviation my whole life, but I've never actually started flying planes until now. So been jumping out of them for 15 years, but never flown one.
Yeah, now you got to learn not to jump out of them.
Exactly right.
Stay in and land them. That's funny.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, so for those of you, we've been doing some podcast episodes on Checkride prep, so you kind of get the gist if you heard those. But the Checkride going to consist of two parts: the oral and the practical part. I was just talking to Alex about he's going to make a call to probably his examiner and just be like, "Hey, look, the weather's not good. I'm going to say we're not flying tomorrow, but do you want to still do the oral?" And we were talking about this, and I think most examiners just want to do it all in one day. So that's probably the answer you'll get, but who knows? But there are kind of two parts to it. And in my Checkride, I got through the oral exam, and then during the pre-flight check, we actually found a bolt missing on the airplane. So we had a discontinuance, which actually was kind of a blessing because I could kind of like take a breath and then just focus on the flying part another time because I was, it's a stressful situation. So we're going to go through, and I'm going to ask Alex probably more than he'll be asked on his actual thing because, it's better to, they always say in sports and stuff like that, like make your practices harder than the actual thing. So that's kind of the goal here. And then I've mentioned this before, and I want to tell this to Alex, one of the tips I would give him is to make a good first impression. You're going to start off with kind of showing your qualifications, going over your IACRA application, your logbook, your documentation, and then proving the aircraft is airworthy and showing the aircraft documentation. If you have everything kind of organized well, right where it's at, that's kind of the first impression. These examiners aren't supposed to have, they're not supposed to change the level of difficulty per person, but they're human. And sometimes if you make a really good first impression and they start to feel confident in your abilities, they may ask you a little bit less questions, and it may help you out a little bit if you can really start. I'm not saying it's a hack to not know everything or anything like that, but it's just a good tip to kind of make a good first impression there. Same with when you get in the aircraft, do a good pre-flight check, pre-flight brief, all that stuff, and nail your taxi. That could also give a first impression of how you handle yourself in the aircraft. So just a tip there. But okay, so you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, cool. So what you're looking at on the screen, by the way, is his cross-country nav log. So we're going to get to that. But first, I know we're on Zoom, so can't really show too much, but maybe, I don't know if you have them with you, but you can talk to it. But show or tell me the required documentation that you need to be PIC for the Checkride flight.
So BPSD, I need to have my driver's or state ID, government issued ID. So that would be my driver's license And then my pilot certificate, so in this case, would be my student pilot certificate because I don't have my private jet.
Yep.
And then I've got a third class medical, make sure that's current and active. And then for student pilots to carry their logbook with proper endorsements.
Cool. Do you know what those endorsements are?
If I'm flying solo, I need solo endorsement, so 90-day solo endorsement. I've got the knowledge test endorsements, and then depending on where I'm flying, if I need a Class B endorsement that I've been trained and stuff for that.
Cool. And then there's also it's kind of another requirement is the required Checkride prep training.
Yeah, like practical test endorsement.
Right. Yeah. So good. You mentioned the knowledge test. Basically, your instructor says, hey, we went over and we reviewed what you missed on the knowledge test. So I just want to take a moment. Do you have your knowledge test handy?
I do.
How did you do on that? How many codes, I guess, did you have on there?
So I got an 87, so I got 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 code.
Okay, cool. And we're not going to go over them exactly. I just want to tell the people watching that the codes are going to look like this. They're called ACS test codes. And his instructor would look up their code and they would tell them the exact kind of topic that he missed a question on. They're not going to tell you the exact question, but the topic. So then the endorsement is to say that you and your instructor reviewed that topic in detail. So, and I assume you guys did that.
Correct.
Nice. Okay. You said you have your medical certificate, third class. Is it current? And how do you know that?
So it is current. The day of my exam July 24th, 2023. And then since I'm under the age of 40, that is good for 60 calendar months.
Yep. And then, so what day would it expire?
It would expire at the end of that month. So it'd be July 31st of 5 years from then.
Nice. So
2028.
Crazy to think about 2028. You got that? Yeah. So that's the calendar month part, right? You get till the end of the month, basically. Yeah. Nice. Nice. Cool. So the FAA is asking more and more about basic med, even if you're not, I don't know about on check rides, but I'm going to ask you a couple, because it might not apply to you. You don't have basic med, but I'm going to ask you a couple basic med questions. If you were to enroll in the basic med program, do you have to get another third class medical AME exam?
No, I would be able to go through my local physician. You got to do the initial one, and then after that, you can go and see your physician.
Cool. Are there any limitations if you were to have basic med?
There are, but I actually can't remember what they are.
Okay, no worries. I doubt they'll ask you to name them all. And this is a good point right here. If they were to ask you that question, if this was a real test and you didn't know, I would say yes. So I would be like, yeah, there's limitations. I didn't remember them all, but I can look them up in the FAR-AM if you want me to.
Yeah.
And so you can do that about 1 or 2 times, be like, hey, I'm going to look them up. The DPE would be kind of a jerk if they were to ask you to list all the limitations. But anyways, speaking of your documents, your permanent address, let's say you change your permanent address, you're going through a move. How does that affect? What do you have to do for your pilot certificate?
You've got to notify the local FSDO or ATP that you need more than 30 days. You have to notify them of that change.
And what happens
if you don't? Then I think your privileges are suspended.
Perfect. At this point, they might, have you get your logbook out and they would pull up IACRA and they would make sure it matches the hours in IACRA, but they'd also be looking for, your required hours. So are you part 61 or part 141?
Part 61.
Okay. So what can you maybe name off what the requirements are for the, the different hours?
So I know that I need 40 hours total. I need to have 3 hours of simulated instrument time and then 3 hours of night flying as well. It's 100 nautical mile cross country and 15 night landings, I think. Something
10.
like that. Maybe it's less than that. 10?
10, yeah.
I was just thinking of what I have. I know
yeah, that's good.
And then there's a cross country of 150 nautical miles total length with 3 full stop landings at different airports. They're pretty close. Is there something I'm missing?
So the 3 hours of check ride prep that we talked about, and then 3 hours cross country total. So that's dual, and then 10 hours solo, and 5 of those solo hours have to be cross country. And then including in that is that long cross country. But yeah. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Again, I doubt they're going to ask you to name them all. As long as you have met those requirements, then you're probably good there. But I like to do it in these mock check rides just to make sure so you can think about it, that and make sure you have
For
them on.
sure.
All right. So if you were to receive your private pilot license today, like, we were to give it to you, would you be current to carry passengers tomorrow? Like, let's say you wanted to take a loved one tomorrow or tonight or whatever, right after you got your license. Would you
Uh-huh.
be current to do that?
I don't think so. I think as a private pilot, I would need to go and do 3 takeoffs and landings after I get my license, or I don't know if that would count while I have my student certificate or not. But
You just have to be PIC to have those landings. So,
yeah, okay. So then in that case, I would be current because I have had solo PIC landings within the last 90 days.
perfect. What about at night if you wanted to fly at night with them?
Night would be the same requirements, so 3 takeoff and landings, but they need to be to a full stop within 90 days.
Perfect. The definition of night, the FAA has a few of those.
Yeah.
For currency, do you know the definition for a night?
For currency, I believe it's civil sunset to civil, or civil twilight to civil sunrise. Is it
Yeah, it's actually 1 hour after sunset,
1 hour
before
after? Okay.
That's for the passengers. Yeah. That's one of the tougher questions. Hopefully they don't ask you that, but
So for passenger currency, you'd be 1 hour after and 1 hour before.
yep.
Okay.
All right. So let's see here. So let's say you receive your license. We're going with that scenario. And tomorrow your friend wants you to take them flying and they say that they'll pay for everything. What do you say?
As a private pilot, I'm not allowed to pay less than my prorated share. So I can't, so if it's just one person, I can't pay less than half.
Perfect. And then could they pay for lunch?
They can pay for lunch if I'm paying for the flight expenses.
Perfect. What if you go to lunch with your friend and they want to have a couple beers at lunch?
So as a pilot, you're not allowed to knowingly transport people that have consumed alcohol unless it's an emergency.
Great. Perfect. Well, let's say you were to celebrate tonight because you just got your license and have some drinks, but you're also flying tomorrow. What are the rules for you in drinking alcohol?
So book rules are 8 hours, can't have consumed any alcohol, and no effect either. So even if you hadn't, or you did wait that 8 hours or something, you were still showing effects, that would still be grounds for not flying. And then the alcohol BAC percentage is 0.04. You got to be less than that.
Perfect. You nailed all three. Nice. Usually people forget one of those, like usually they forget the no effects part. So good. Yeah, looks like you're ready to go. In terms of you're qualified to fly today. So let's transition to the aircraft and see if that's ready for us to fly today. So tell me the things the aircraft needs today to be airworthy for us to fly.
So to be airworthy, we need our airworthiness certificate, our registration. You would need a radio operator license if you're traveling outside of the United States or internationally. But for us, that wouldn't be needed. And then our operating limitations and weight balance.
Nice. So you named the documentation and you're correct. And then that airworthiness document, does that expire?
That doesn't have an expiration date, but it's only valid if the aircraft is maintained to all the records are shown in the maintenance logbooks are up to date.
Right. Yeah. A lot goes into that airworthiness certificate, right? Because it's only about, so I kind of like to think of it. You got your required documents, and then under that airworthiness document, there's a bunch more requirements, things like inspections, right? So what inspections do have to be met for it to be airworthy?
So there's a handful. We're looking at an annual inspection, a VOR check, if you're planning on using VORs for IFR. You've got your 100-hour inspection, your altimeter and pitot-static inspection, transponder inspection, and emergency locator transmitter inspection.
What about equipment wise? You don't have to name off all the equipment, maybe if you know the mnemonic, but what equipment do you need? Let's say you're flying during the day.
So I have that kind of stuff in front of me because there's a bunch of them, and I think I could probably list them all off, but do you want me to list them off if I can?
Sure, yeah.
So we've got your airspeed indicator, tachometer, oil pressure gauge, manifold pressure gauge, altimeter, temperature gauge, oil temperature. So we got fuel gauges, a landing gear indicator, anti-collision lights, magnetic heading indicator, and then ELT and seatbelts.
So you're using a tomato flames, right?
Yeah.
Some feedback there. If they ask you kind of that opened airworthy, what does it take to have the aircraft airworthy today? It's not just the documentation because all that stuff is underneath that airworthiness
Uh-huh.
certificate. So it's the inspections, it's the required equipment. What else? There's a couple other things that could make an airplane technically not legal to fly. There's two things in particular. They're kind of similar. Can you think of those?
One that we didn't mention earlier was the airworthiness directive.
Perfect. Yeah.
Not sure what else I'm missing.
Yeah. No, that's good. The other one is like open squawks. So if like,
Mhm. Okay.
if a pilot finds something in flight right before your check ride, then they write it in the squawk book, then
Mhm.
technically it has to be signed off by a certified mechanic before it can fly again. So cool. Good job. We talked about the required equipment. We talked about, oh, does the registration of the aircraft, does that expire?
It does expire. I think it's 7 years now.
Yeah. Yeah, it just changed not too long ago. Okay, you got the inspections down. In your actual check ride, I'm gonna actually want to see that these inspections have been met and that any
Uh-huh.
airworthiness directives are met. So where would you show me that?
In the maintenance log.
Cool. Yep. Perfect. And tip for that, I don't know if you've done that. I know your check ride is tomorrow, but if it gets
Uh-huh.
rescheduled to get a hold of those a little bit early if you can, and maybe just make some sticky notes to just be able to flip right to, the
Yeah, I've
annual.
come with my instructor and
Okay,
already
cool.
put tabs on them and stuff. So I've got a pretty good hand on where to find those.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, that kind of just takes some stress out.
I know it was kind of stressful just now seeing those for the first time, like a couple days ago.
Yeah, I know, right? They never show students that until like it's
Yeah.
time for the check ride. Yeah, same thing happened to me. And then actually, I have a lot of gripes about the flight school that I went to, but I found some things that were not up to what they should be in that logbook. So that delayed my check ride even more. So hopefully that didn't happen to you. You kind of mentioned this, but I was gonna say, let's say the VOR inspection hasn't been done for like 40 days. Can we fly in our check ride?
Yeah, as long as we're flying VFR.
Right, because the VOR is just the inspection is just for IFR, right? Cool. And then you talked about the 100 hour. Say there 100 hours been done at 553 hours on the aircraft, and the hours currently sit at 652 hours, but you need to fly, let's say the airport you're at, there's no one to get the inspection done. So you have to fly, it's 3 hours away. Can you do that?
As long as if you're going to fly over, as long as you're flying it to a maintenance facility, that's allowed. And then you would just subtract the hours that were overflown from the next 100 hour. So if it was due at 5:53 or 6:53, the next one after that would be due at 7:53, regardless of how many hours you flew over.
Right. It's always just 100, 100, 100, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And then do you have to have any special documentation to be able to do that?
Yeah. Then you need a special flight permit from the ATC.
Very good. All right. So one of the pieces of equipment that's not always required, right, is a transponder. So if our flight today, I guess your flight, let's show people kind of your general check ride scenario flight. Does this flight require you to have a transponder?
Does not.
Okay. And why? Just you don't have to say all the required areas of transponder, but why is that?
Because for our flight, we're not going through Class Bravo or Class Charlie airspace. In Class D, a transponder is not required, and that's where we're flying to is a Class D airport.
Cool. Yep. Yeah. And then
And you can see Cincinnati airspace is right there. So we're just outside of
right here,
uh, yeah, just outside the 30-mile threshold.
the 30 Mode C Veil. Very nice. Okay. And then below 10,000 feet as well, right?
Yep.
Very good. Let's say during your pre-flight check, you find that one of the required pieces of equipment is not working properly. What would we do, essentially? Like, one, could we fly? Two, if we can't fly, what do we have to do to be able to fly?
The first we would see is that piece of equipment on the required list of equipment. So if it is required, then we wouldn't be able to fly. We would have to have a mechanic fix it and log that before we would be able to fly. If it is not on that list, we would still want to have a mechanic at least deactivate it and mark it in op before we would go fly.
Perfect. You said the A tomato flames, which is from, straight from the FAR, but there could be other required equipment for your specific aircraft. Where might you find that?
And the minimum equipment list.
So that's the MEL, right? Does your aircraft you're flying tomorrow have an MEL?
I don't believe it does actually.
Okay. So is there one, there's one more place that, because most trainer aircraft don't have an MEL. They're usually
Yeah.
for large aircraft that have like multiple redundant parts.
Uh,
But there's one more place that they might be listed. Do you know where that?
in the POH.
Yeah, they have different names, but sometimes it's like a kinds of operations list where it'll say like, or sometimes it'll just be listed under a required equipment depending on the POH. But the kinds of operations will be like, if you fly at this altitude, you need this, or it's like a specific requirement for a specific type of operation. So let's say your check ride tomorrow was actually at night and not during the day. What might be some things that you should consider before taking off? What changes between a day flight and a night flight?
The equipment that is required for the airplane.
And what's that?
So if we are flying an airplane that has fuses, you need to have a backup set of fuses, or at least three of each kind. But my airplane doesn't. We have circuit breakers, so that doesn't apply there. I need a landing light, and then we need anti-collision lights and position lights, and then a source of electricity.
Do you know the source of electricity on your aircraft?
For my aircraft, it's an alternator.
Or is there a backup source?
There's a battery.
Yeah. And then what about for like you, the pilot, in terms of flying at night? Is there any difference in like preparation or things you might want to consider?
I need to be night current if I'm
Yep.
taking passengers. So that would be the three takeoffs and landing to a full stop within the previous 90 days. Physically, it's good to let your eyes adjust for 30 minutes at least. Like, so don't look at any bright lights until 30 minutes until you go and start trying to fly.
That was one of the ones. So yeah, good. All things I'm looking for. And then even during flight, you want to avoid white
Mhm.
lights. So that's
Yeah.
why we use the red. What about during taxi? Let's say there's other aircraft taxiing around too. Is there anything you might want to consider?
Yeah. Keeping the anti-collision light off because that's the bright one that strobes.
Because you don't want to blind everyone else, right?
Yeah.
I would probably add as well, if you're answering this, if they ask you this tomorrow, electricity is so important at night, right? And
Uh,
especially like phone, iPad, or flashlight, like having some backup batteries. It's always a good,
yeah.
I mean, for any flight, that's a good idea. But those are a couple things I might add as well. Oh, and then understanding takeoff and landing, taxiway and runway lighting systems of where you're going, because we don't really need that during the day, right? So let's say we're going for a night flight and we need a landing light. I know there's the for hire thing, but let's say landing light's required, but it's not working during our pre-flight check. Can you, as a private pilot, like let's say you just need to replace the bulb, can you do that?
I think replacing the light bulb is under preventative maintenance.
I should have known this before I asked. But yeah, I wanted you to say preventative maintenance because you, as a private pilot, are only allowed to
Yeah.
do that. And it's a long list of things.
I've read through that list a little bit, and there's a couple of things that, sure, I might be able to replace that one thing, but then to get to that one thing, you have to take a number of other things apart. And
Right.
so, it's like, can you really?
Yeah, it's one of the more confusing for us, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does say replacing bulbs. So yeah, as long as that's all you need to do, right, to get to
Mhm.
that part, yeah, you could do that. I'm not going to make you list any of that, but you mentioned the kind of required documentation. You mentioned weight and balance and the operating limitations. Where are the operating limitations listed?
So that's all listed in the POH as well as placard on the aircraft itself.
Okay. Can you give me an example of an operating limitation that's in the cockpit?
The airspeed indicator can show a handful of airspeed
Yep.
limitation.
Perfect. So the next thing that you mentioned was the weight and balance. Let's pull that up here. I got this from your POH, right?
Mhm.
Is this the right one? Okay, cool. Maybe you tell me the numbers and I'll write them in, and then you can tell me the math on it.
For the basic empty weight of the aircraft specifically that I'm going to be flying was 1566. And then total usable fuel at 40 gallons is 240 pounds. And then front passenger and pilot was 370 pounds. I put rear baggage or rear passengers because that's where I put my flight bag and like that has some weight to it. So I put 20 pounds for that just to cover our bases.
Okay.
And then 0 for area 1, 0 for area 2. So that puts our total ramp weight at 2196 minus 7 pounds for fuel allowance for start taxi, which takes our takeoff weight to 2189.
You don't have to tell me each moment of each position, but how do you calculate the moment?
So for each weight, you have an arm for that location that it's based at. I multiply the weight times the arm, and that gets your total moment for that section.
Yep.
And then you would add up all the moments, and then you can take your aircraft weight divided by that moment, and that gives you your total CG arm.
Okay, so what's your total moment that you got there?
Total moment was 91.83.
91.3.
So
That's the CG or the moment?
that's the moment.
Okay, so that's like,
So 91,830.
okay, gotcha. Yeah. And then so you just take the moment divided by the weight, and what CG did you get?
42.41 inches. And so looking at the chart in the POH, that is well within the normal range for the DG.
All right, maybe just tell me what to do.
I took our total moment arm, our moment, so at the bottom, it was 91,
Okay,
91.83. So if you want to
so
call it 92.
so like
Yep.
right here. Okay,
Yeah. And then went up from there to our total weight, which was 2189. So just below
total
2200.
right on this normal
Yep.
category thing.
Cool. And so now it's within that envelope.
Smack dab in the middle. Nice. Good job. Do you know a couple questions about that process? Do you know that arm, right? It's in inches.
Uh-huh.
So we said, I think that your CG was like 41 inches or something like that. What is that measured from?
That's measured from the firewall, from in between the engine and the cockpit.
Okay. Yeah, that's like the reference data
Yeah.
line, right? Nice. Let's say last minute your examiner brings like 80 pounds of bags unexpectedly. And you throw that in station one, let's say bag area one. So we have 80 pounds. Just walk me through kind of what you would do to recalculate.
So I would go back into the POH in the weight and balance section where it's got the list of all the arms for each area. I would go and find the arm for package area one and then multiply that. So say it's 50 inches or something. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but that would give us the moment for that. And then I would have to re-add all the moments to incorporate that one, add the additional weight to the total takeoff weight and recalculate that. And then from there, you can figure out your new CG arm.
Perfect. So just want to make sure a lot of students there's like shortcuts out there, when something changes in the weight and balance. Those things always screwed me up. I always made mistakes when I tried to do the shortcuts. So yeah, just re-add everything, redo everything, and
Yeah.
you're good to go. So that's good. All right. So we're sitting about right here, and we added 80 pounds of baggage. So that's going to take us up to here, right? We're also going to move left or right because the CG is going to change. Where do you think adding 80 pounds to the back of the aircraft, what do you think that would do to the CG?
That would tip it to the right if you're moving it further aft.
Perfect. Yeah, you add weight to the back, you shift the CG to the back. Let's say we added, I don't know, 120 pounds, or I don't know what the number would get us out here, but why is it dangerous to fly outside to the right of this boundary?
So if our CG is too far aft, that can create a hazard. It can make the plane easier to stall. So it's flying more with all the weight in the back. It's harder to recover from stalls. It wants to constantly be pitching nose up.
And then what about if we had the opposite? Let's say no baggage, not a lot of fuel, and your examiner was like 300 pounds or something, and we were
Yeah, that would cause for a moment or an arm that's too far forward, and if it's too far forward, the plane has a tendency to want to pitch forward, so it could make takeoffs a little bit harder.
yeah, and then yeah, good. I was gonna say, what about landing as well? There's a topic in aviation that the location of the CG in relation to the center of the lift does,
Center pressure.
yeah. So what is that? What's the word, I guess, that I'm looking for? So you said that it tends to stall when we have an aft CG. The word I'm looking for is stability, right? So
Yeah.
when it's aft of CG, what happens to the stability of the aircraft?
I mean, it's a bit less stable.
Yeah, yeah, just right. So when you tend to stall, you also make it less stable. I think that would be good to put into your answer there because stability. So the definition of stability is you're flying along straight and level, you get rocked right? So bump of turbulence, there's positive. So there's dynamic stability and there's static stability. Static stability means it's initially going to come back. But if it's just static stability, no dynamic stability, then it's going to always come back to level, but it's going to continue to oscillate. So if you also add in dynamic stability, it oscillates, but then the oscillations get smaller and then you slowly just stabilizes itself. So
Mhm.
we always want our aircraft to have both positive static and dynamic stability. You said when we have an aft CG, we're like, it always wants to do this. And so if we get bumped, it's not going to want to come back. It's actually going to want to go this way towards stall. What about when we're too far forward, right, with our CG? What about that with stability?
Same thing. It would push it out of stability, and it would probably want to continue to oscillate down.
So it actually makes it a little bit more stable, but it's tricky because it makes it harder to fly at the same time. So too far forward CG is actually more of it shrinks our flight envelope and what we can do. But in terms of stability, it makes it do this quicker. I know some examiners, they like to talk about the kind of the background of the stability and why the CG relates to that. So one more weight and balance question. Let's say we're like 30 pounds over max gross takeoff weight. What's something we could do?
So if you're over the max burst, you can take out baggage or take out fuel.
Yeah, perfect. And then you'd have to recalculate the weight and balance, right? What's another consideration when we take out fuel to be under weight?
If you're taking out fuel, you got to make sure you have enough to get to your destination still,
Yeah.
or plan a fuel stop.
And what is like, how much fuel do you need? Like, is there a
So for
requirement?
daytime VFR flight, you need enough to get to your destination plus 30 minutes of cruise or 75% power cruise fuel.
Nice. So we're gonna switch over to cross country scenario for those people listening. The oral exams, it's not like they just sit you there and ask you questions. They have you show you everything for the flight, like we have been, like the qualifications of you, the qualification of the aircraft, and they ask you questions around that. So it's all real life scenario based stuff. So that's kind of what's going to continue as you go through and show them what the cross country flight that you've planned. So one thing they might do, and I don't know, did the examiner already give you kind of a specific scenario other than just, hey, we're going to fly from here to here?
No, that was it. Here's the plan across country with me on board from here to here.
Okay. So I would expect them to maybe add to that scenario when you're in your oral. So for example, they might say you got 5 hours of sleep last night and the place we're going is a wedding and you're the best man at the wedding. And let's say what time is your check right at?
6 a.m.
6 a.m. Okay. And then you probably be done with the oral. Probably, let's say you start the practical part at 9 a.m. or something. All right. So let's say and then how long is the flight take? Did you estimate?
Just under an hour, 55 minutes.
Okay. Let's say the flight's 2 hours. Let's say it's a longer flight. And the wedding's at like 1 p.m. and we're taking off at 9 a.m. What are some possible risks for that situation that you would think about, or how would you think about that?
Yeah. Well, the first, like you said, if I got 5 hours of sleep, it's not a ton. So I got to do an assessment on myself. Like, am I rested enough for this flight? Make sure I, as a pilot, am feeling good to go. And then if it's a long flight, we need to be there by a certain time. We got to make sure that we're taking off with plenty of time. And if that means we might be cutting into sunrise time, so we got to make sure that make sure the flight's going to be during the day. If it's not, then I need to make sure that I'm current for night activities.
So it's your call as a PIC. Are we gonna take off? Are we gonna do this thing?
I mean, I think so. As long as we're not pushing it and rushing to get out, it'll be okay. I mean, I can operate on 5 hours of sleep most days.
Okay, so your personal minimums with 5 hours of sleep is okay.
I think so.
Okay.
As long as I guess I had a good breakfast, I ate, I didn't drink the day before, I would feel okay.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think that's a fine answer. I would probably lean on in your check ride saying
Towards
no,
no.
but I'm glad you said, that you would do an assessment essentially. And if you
Hmm.
were feeling the effects of that 5 hour sleep, but the examiner might say, sometimes we can't feel those effects. there's lots of studies on sleep and the reduced cognitive ability and even muscle ability that comes with not getting enough sleep. So I would err on the side of just saying no on that one. But in real life, it's your own personal limitation. So I'm glad you said that, and you said you do an assessment. So that's good. Okay, so let's go here, and this is your. So kind of just direct me around. This is the airport you're taking off of, right?
Yep. Yeah, Warren County there.
Yeah. So why don't you tell me? Just kind of give me an overview and I'll kind of follow along and then tell me the checkpoint, why you chose it, and the altitude and why you chose the altitude.
So we're taking off out of India 68, and then I chose.
Sorry, by the way, is that like missing in the sky vector, the I-68? I couldn't find it
It
for.
is.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know why. But yeah, so I chose a cruising altitude of 5,500. Main reason for that is that gives us a pretty good altitude to glide if we need to a couple different options along the way. We could go higher. That would give us maybe a little bit more options. Like we could go to 7,500 since we're traveling eastbound and it needs to be an odd number altitude plus 500. So moving along onto my first checkpoint was so after top of climb. Top of climb was going to be 10 miles based on the POH. And then from there is another 6 miles to Blanchester. Blanchester is just a small little town. There's not a ton out in this area, it's mostly farm fields and stuff. So it's pretty limited, slim pickings on visual checkpoints.
Okay. So if you're flying this at, I guess what is this yellow here?
So yellow is the congested area.
So that's like the town, right? Of
So that would be a town, yeah.
Blanchester. Yeah. And then so at night, right? The idea is that's what the lights would look like, right?
Yeah, tiny little Gloucester, small town there. And then moving forward, our next checkpoint was Hillsborough, which right there.
Okay.
And that town is definitely a little bit bigger, but I have a direct straight line, and my checkpoint was just going to be seeing it off my left wing.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
It's about 6 miles away, so I should be able to see it from a mile up, as well as the Highland County Airport. That's a good, decent sized airport, so you might be able to see that as well. And then, so we're flying through an MOA here, which it is acceptable to fly through an MOA. You just have to exercise extreme caution. So one of the things that I would look for would be I like to fly with ForeFlight, so you can connect that to ADS-B, and you can also see other traffic. So keep an eye out for traffic in the area. I know military are supposed to have ADS-B as well, so you can see them if they are on there. So if it was active, if people were flying in there, then maybe I would move around it a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. A couple questions about that. What if this was, you mentioned you were right about the MOA and that you're allowed to fly. What if it was a restricted area?
Yeah, so through restricted areas, and you can't fly through those unless you get prior approval or if the restricted area is not active.
Okay, where would you find that information?
On chart supplement.
Okay, on the margins.
Yeah.
Nice. What is this right here? The VR 1632.
That's an airway for military.
Right, yeah, it's a military training route. So I guess you don't kind of ends there, doesn't it? But let's say we were, kind of flying through there. What altitudes do those training routes operate at?
Good question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no worries. I think it changes depending on the length of this code. I think if it's 3 digits, and I don't remember this completely either, but I think if it's like below 1500, they're usually lower operations for those training routes. They're usually closer to the ground. So
Okay.
but anyways, here's a tip, right? I'm trying to ask you things that your path goes through, right? Because that's what the examiner is going to do. So since this is so close, might be, before you check right, just to look that up because it might be a possible question for you.
So there, where you kind of we're just moving it around from. That's my next checkpoint at Peebles. That's another small little town. Again, like out in this area, that's probably why there's an MOA there. There's nothing out that way. So there's a tiny little town there. That was my next checkpoint. And then further down, the next checkpoint's about 20 miles away, and that's going to be the Ohio River. It's a pretty big one. Next to Portsmouth, the town of Portsmouth as well.
Okay, so do you have that note in your, because the one question I had when I saw Ohio River on your thing was what if you see the
River's
Ohio
along.
River over here? How do you
Yeah.
know you're at this point over the river?
Yeah. So for this, at least this whole section of the trip, I was going to use the was it York VOR? So I
Right.
should be heading towards that VOR on on a particular radial going over the Ohio River would be my checkpoint.
Okay, good.
So
So
if I'm going over the Ohio River and I am no longer on that VOR radial, then I am not in the right spot.
right. Yeah. Okay. So you're cross-checking these checkpoints with your VOR indication.
Yeah.
Nice. Very cool. All right. A couple other questions. In Peebles, there's some other, I think that I would use some other visual kind of aids. The one is this line. What is this black line with like notches on it?
So that is railroad track.
Nice. And then what about this kind of dark gray double line?
That would be like a highway of some kind.
All right, good. Continue on.
So once we get to that VOR, the last major checkpoint was WU. It's an airport there along the river. And from there, now I think it's about 13 miles or so to the final destination.
Cool. Have you landed at this TWU?
I've not. I've never been over here before.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm curious. It looks like it's smack dab on the river. I wonder, it might be a
Yeah.
cool place to land at. Okay, yeah, I noticed this. What is this thing right here? This little like tower looking thing.
So that's a large tower, and I believe kind of hard to see, but I'm pretty sure that one's lighted. Can't tell.
Yeah, it is. Nice. And then what are these
Yeah.
numbers next to it mean?
So the top number is how high it is MSL, and then the parentheses number is AGL. So it's a 1,200-foot tower, so it's a pretty sizable tower.
Nice. So we'd be at 5,500. So do we have enough clearance there?
Yeah, so we got to be 1,000 feet above the tallest obstacle. So we'll be a little over 2,000. So that'd be enough.
Okay, great. Nicely done. So you mentioned what airspace are we landing in? You mentioned it
Yeah,
before,
so
but
it's a Class Delta airspace.
what's this number here?
So that's how high the airspace goes up to. So it goes from the surface up to 3,400 feet.
Okay, nice. So glass. And then what airspace would be above 3,400? Like at 30,000?
We'd be in Class Echo.
Okay, yeah, these things. Let's see. What is this like gray?
Yeah, so that's a terminal radar service area. So that means that they have radar capabilities, and in that area, those are optional to use or not.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's good that you know that because I could see him definitely asking about that since you're
For sure.
flying into it. See here. And then are these numbers for the Tersa as well? These black?
They are. Yeah, the outer ring is the 6,000 to 2,500, and then 6,000 to surface is the smaller ring.
Nice. Okay, and then is this airport controlled, uncontrolled? How do you know?
It is controlled, so if the airport identifier is blue, then it means that it has a control tower.
Okay, and so this one's not blue, so does that mean
Correct. That does not have a control tower.
okay? And then what's a star mean?
Star means that it has a beacon at the airport.
Good. And then what about do these notches mean anything?
Yeah, I mean it means it has fuel services.
Nice. Okay, so here's the information for this airport, HTS. What's the control tower frequency?
So the control tower is where it says CT, so it's 118.5. But think,
Yep.
yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and then I'll zoom in so you can see it better. But what's the elevation?
So the field elevation there is 828.
Good. What does that L mean?
That's I mean, the runway's lighted.
Yep, there's lighting available. And then what if there was an asterisk by this L? What does that mean?
That just means that there's limitations to it, and so you'd have to go and check the supplement, see what those limitations were.
And then last thing, the 70. What is that? What's that tell us?
That's the runway length. It's got the longest runway is 7,000 feet.
Perfect. All right, nice work. You know your charts. Some other questions they might ask when you said the altitude. Let's say you said we need to be odd intervals. Let's say we went up to 11,500. Would we need a supplemental oxygen at that height?
At that height, no.
Okay, what if we did 13,500?
Yeah, 13,500 we would need if we're going to be above that. above 12.5 for more than 30 minutes, then the minimum flight crew would need to have oxygen available.
Nice, perfect. You kind of mentioned it before when you were determining the altitude of 5,500. You said, the VFR cruising altitude requirements, but you also mentioned like kind of why it's nice to have enough altitude. What is the glide ratio of your aircraft? Do you know?
Don't know exactly, but I know for most trainer aircraft, it's usually about a 10 to 1.
Okay, and why is that? I guess why is that important to know, and what airspeed does that relate to?
So that relates to your aircraft's best glide airspeed, which for mine it's 65 knots. So at 65 knots, I'm at best glide. If I'm a mile up, that means that I would be able to travel 10 miles on glide.
That's the speed at which you can get your
Get
optimal
your best glide, yeah.
glide ratio right now. Nice. Okay, here's just kind of a silly one. If ATC asked you what altitude you're flying at when you're flying at 8,500 feet, how would you say that on the radio? What's the like?
I would tell HTC that we're traveling at 8,500.
And what about if you're at 10,500 feet? How would you want to say that over the radio?
10,500.
Nice. If ATC calls out, let's say we're flying along and they call out traffic at 2 o'clock, 5 miles westbound when we're making, what is this heading? Like 150 or something. So they say, what did I say? What I forgot what I said. 2 o'clock, 5 miles westbound. And let's say let me zoom in here. All right, let's say we're at Peebles, right? And we're flying, southeast, and they say 2 o'clock, 5 miles westbound. Where would you expect that aircraft to be?
So if it was at 2 o'clock, it maybe kind of around that 2.4, the big 2.4 number, and then they would be traveling towards us.
What did I say? Westbound? Yeah. So yeah. Yeah, you got it. Good. And what is this two for, by the way?
2.4 there, that's the highest point in that section of the grid, plus 300 feet, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I think you're right. And it's like rounded to the
Round to the nearest or the highest 100,
and
the
then plus
next 100,
300. Yeah.
and then plus 300. Yeah. So in that case, the tallest object could be 2,000 and just under 100, or
Right.
right at.
Nice. Yeah. So it's like a quick way to just kind of plan your altitudes, right? Because
Mhm.
you're like, okay, I have to be above 1,900, 1,700, 2,400. Okay, I'll pick
Yeah.
5,500. Nice. All right. Let's see here. All right. So let's kind of talk about this. Can you see this okay? Or I guess you got it
Yep.
in
Yeah.
front of
I've
you,
got
but
mine for me as well.
okay. So this TC true course, how did you get your true course?
So for true course, I laid out the sectional and then used my plotter and figured out the heading.
Nice. And then kind of jumping back to here, you have this plus 11. What is that?
So that's the wind correction angle. So I figured out what the winds were and used my E6B and got the wind correction angle.
Okay. I'm not going to have you do your E6B, but they might give you an E6B problem. But what other information did you need to do that? You said you had used your E6B with true course. What other information did you need to find that wind correction angle?
So I needed the wind direction and then the wind speed. So that's over on the in the left column. You see it was at 275 was the direction and 25 knots was the velocity.
Nice. Okay. And then, all right, you have this we go 130 plus 11 to get to our true heading of 141. And then we have this plus 6.
Magnetic variance. And so if you can see on the chart, you got the isogonic line.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's one.
Yeah. So the one closer to destination, I think, is 7 west.
But yeah, this magenta line, right?
Yep.
All right. Good. Yeah, the magnetic variation. Cool. And then so we had 6 to get 147. That's our magnetic heading. And then what's the plus 3?
So the last one is the magnetic deviation from the instruments in the airplane that cause a difference in the compass itself.
Right. They disrupt the magnetic field a little bit. So cool. So then that 150, that's what you're actually gonna fly. All right. So let's see, let's talk about the speed. So you got 74 here. Is that what airspeed is that?
That's our climbing up the cruise airspeed.
So is that your indicated, calibrated, or
That's our true airspeed. The
okay?
calibrated airspeed is pretty much the same. It's like one or less than a knot difference. So I just use the true airspeed.
And how do you come up with that
There's a chart in POH
for?
for climb. I don't know what they call it. Let me look it up real quick.
So these are all true airspeeds?
No, indicated airspeed.
Okay. So you're saying the indicated airspeed is basically the same as calibrated airspeed, and you know
Correct.
that from the chart. Okay. Gotcha. So, and then your true airspeed, you don't have that on here. You just went to ground speed, right? On here. Tell me how you got from your calibrated airspeed here, which you're saying is essentially the same thing as indicator airspeed for, slow aircraft we fly. And so tell me how you got from that to ground speed. So 74 to 90 for this first leg.
Yeah. So on the needs to be take your winds and the speed, and then spin the dial, and it'll line up with what your ground speed would be, taking those winds into account. So
Yeah.
for us, we have a slight tailwind, but quartering tailwind or so, so increases our speed. So ground speed is going to be higher than our airspeed.
All right. Speaking of wind, where did you get the wind information?
On aviationweather.gov.
What kind of report did you get it from?
So for this one, it was just the wind aloft,
Okay. What altitude did you use on that wind to loft?
6,000.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably fine. They might, because this is the first leg and you'll be climbing up there. They might,
Mhm.
I don't think they would dock you or anything like that, but they might say, why'd you choose 6,000? Why not 3,000 or something? They might ask you
Mhm.
something like that, but I
Yeah,
don't,
I
I
mean,
think it's
do you
fine.
think would it be better to for that first leg that I've used something closer to the ground, so use the halfway point, or
That's what I do. I use the halfway point. I'm not
okay,
gonna have you. I think you're fine. I'm not gonna have you redo all this stuff. But if you end up having to because you're flying on a new day, I would probably use 3,000 if you have it.
yeah,
The key here is like to always have a reason for what you do. So I could
yeah,
see the examiner being like, "Well, why did you win? If you're not flying at 6,000 yet because you're not your top of climb. Like
yeah,
why'd you use 6,000?" So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
that
like
makes sense. Okay,
yeah. Okay, what else? Okay, so the fuel. Can you tell me how you kind of calculated these fuel values on the right side?
we're planning to start with full tanks, so start with 40 gallons, and then in the POH there's a cruise performance chart, so that you can use that to figure out what your cruise altitude is going to be, your speed, and what the fuel consumption rate would be. And then there's also the time, fuel, and distance to climb chart to give you our initial one. So our initial one, I think I've got 2.7 there.
So you
Um,
use the climb chart for that one?
correct.
Okay, yeah, good.
So climb chart for that one. So to climb up to 5,500 feet, it was going to be 1.1 gallon. And then you also have to add in, or no, sorry, it was going to be 1.5, 1.6. Yeah, 1.6. And then you add 1.1 for the start, taxi, and takeoff allowance as well to
Okay,
give us the 2.7.
nice. And then the
And
rest of
from that,
these are the cruise performance chart.
correct. Yeah. And so that's based off of 7 gallons per hour. And then you're using E6B to calculate the total time of that leg. And then you're multiplying that by the gallons per hour. And using E6B, you get those numbers.
Nice. All right. Sounds pretty good. Just curious, this is just kind of like your alternates, the frequencies and distances.
Yep. Yeah.
All right.
For each leg, I put what the closest airport was to that specific checkpoint, and then what their CTAF or control tower frequency was, and how far it is from that checkpoint.
Oh yeah, I like that a lot. It's good.
Yeah. That way, if there's a diversion required, it's good to just have that right in front of me.
Yeah, and like we talked about if you lose an engine, how far you got to glide, right? This is
Hmm.
this distance right there. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
All right, good. Let's see here. There's a bunch of remarks on this one, and I don't think a examiner is going to expect you to remember all these remarks. So maybe just until the remarks, can you tell me what this METAR up here on the top says?
So that is the airport that we're planning on flying to. That's Huntington, and then that is the time that the forecast came out. So that was on the 3rd at 20:51 Zulu. And then it was automatic. It wasn't hand typed or spoken. And then those are our winds that are coming out gusting 18. And we got 10-mile visibility. We got a few clouds at 4,600, view at 10,000. And then that is our temperature and dew point.
Nice.
And that's our altimeter setting.
Low pressure, huh? Probably that weather you're talking about. Okay, and then what about the TAF here? Can you do that?
So that is at the time that it was created was on the 3rd at 2113 Zulu. And it is valid from the 3rd at 2100 to the 4th at 1800.
Nice.
And then the wind 240, 11 gusts and 18. It is plus 6 miles visibility, so it's greater than 6 miles. And then the showers in the vicinity broken at 5,000 clouds.
Nice. And then tempo, what does that mean?
So that's temporary from those times. So the 3rd, 21 to the 3rd, 2400. Visibility is going to be 4 statute miles. And then you have light rain showers.
Nice. And then you don't have to do these other ones, but what about this code right here?
So that one is light rain snow shower. So it's going to be a rain snow mix.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. Flying tomorrow. And then
Do you know?
clouds at 1,000.
Oh yeah, for fun, take a stab at the remarks.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me try and do it because I was okay. I think this is a
That's
code
the type of precipitation reported.
yeah, right. Yeah. So I think it has precipitation. Peak wind was 250 at 33 knots at 1957. This is rain began 1959 east at night east miles east, maybe. Sea level pressure in like hectopascals. I don't know why they change all the units. That's stupid. And then this is precipitation for the last hour. And then this is the last 6 hours precipitation amount. Temperature and dew point. I think it's like this one's hard. It's like if the first digit's a one, it's negative, and it's like so like the temperature is like 11.1, and then the dew point is like 0.6 or something like that. And then I don't know what the hell that is. All right, cool. Let's see here. What else we got? Good job, man. You're doing good. All right, yeah. Can you tell me how you did like your takeoff and landing distance, how you know that you're gonna have enough runway and stuff like that?
Yeah. So that's other stuff that in the POH, they've got a takeoff and landing distance chart. And so for takeoff, the POH assumes max weight. And so you just figure out what your pressure altitude. So for the airport that we were going to take off at, our pressure altitude was going to be right around 1,500 or so. So I just like to round up to be conservative with these. So I would use the 2,000. So we'll look at what the temperature is going to be. When I was looking before, ground temperatures were going to be like 2 or 3 Celsius. So we can use the 0 Celsius column, and it would be 1770 to clear a 50-foot obstacle.
Okay, yeah, I have the landing. I found the landing distance, but just so
Okay.
people have a visual. But just so you know, this isn't the same thing as what you're reading off. But yeah, so basically you grabbed a value here first, 0, 50 to clear 50-foot obstacle. And then why did you do 50-foot obstacle? Is there an obstacle?
No, but
Just to be conservative?
just to be
Okay, yeah.
so
So yeah, that's kind of like if you're asked that, yeah, just always have a good reason. Just be like, hey, yeah, just to be. I just always do it because personal limitation. I just wanted that to be conservative. Yeah.
And then yeah, same thing for the landing. But with each of these, you also have to read the notes above. So if there's a headwind, you can decrease these distances by a certain amount. For the sake of conservative, you can not decrease it if you have a headwind and just still assume that you need that certain length. And then yeah, if you're landing on grass or something, you have to increase the distances by quite a bit.
Cool. And then I think it cut you off, but the rest of then so you get like you do this twice, right? And then subtract the differences.
I'm not sure what you mean.
So because you're taking off, what's the elevation you're taking off on?
Like 900 feet.
Okay, so since you're not taking off on sea level, I'm not 100% with Cessna, but I'm pretty sure on the Cessna just like it is with like a Cherokee. You basically want to get a value for your takeoff. So let's say you said it's about 900, so 1,000 feet, and then you'd get this number.
Huh.
Oh, but no, never mind. Yeah, maybe that's the climb performance chart.
Yes, that is. I think I know what you're talking about. For
Yeah, like where you get
that's the
value and
climb
then
chart.
okay. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So if I'm at 1,500, then I'm cruising up to 5,000 or something. I subtract the difference between those.
Right. Okay, cool. Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah, I'm just not used to the Cessna charts. But yeah, okay, cool. Let's see what else we got here. Oh yeah, kind of going back to the takeoff and landing stuff. Let's say, and this is something that they could add to your scenario. They could be on the lookout for this in your scenario. That what they did to me is they said, my full scenario, obviously we didn't fly the whole thing, but my full scenario was to a high elevation airport here in California. And then they said, it's 85 degrees when we get there. So what are some things to consider when, let's say, 5,000 foot elevation, it's 85 degrees. What would you
Uh-huh.
consider as a pilot flying?
Yeah. So for anything high altitude like that and being warmer, our density altitude is going to be through the roof. And so we need to consider our takeoff and landing performance and if we're going to have enough runway to be able to land at this airport. And then can we also, if we can land at it, can we take back off?
Nice. Good. Yeah, so be on the lookout for them to sneak, a density altitude consideration in there. And then why does elevation and temperature, high temperature, why does that reduce our performance?
It reduces the performance because the air is less dense. And so there is less air for wings to grab onto to create lift.
Yeah, and then also the less for the propeller to grab onto, less for the engine to, mix with fuel and
Uh,
combust. So yeah, everything good. So you said altitude affects it negatively. Temperature rise affects it negatively. Is there anything else that increases density altitude?
humidity.
Very good. That's it, man. That's all I got for you. They might ask maybe I mean, obviously, there might be some things based off what you missed. If you want to read off what you missed, I could ask you some more if we missed anything.
Yeah, I got a handful. I got them written down as well as what the
Yeah, so
actual thing.
for people watching, we're talking about the ACS test codes of what he missed on the written. The examiner on your Checkride is going to be sure to they create a plan for you what they're going to test on you, and they use the ACS and they use what you missed on the written. So they're going to be sure to ask you things about what you missed on the written. So just make sure you're up on those. So that's why I'm asking Alex kind of what that is.
Yeah. So the first two of mine were about tachying. So the one was the airport marking signs and lights. I'm pretty sure the question that I got wrong on the exam was something about nighttime lighting.
Oh,
And
okay.
then there might have been another one about the runway hold short sign. So it was like the red signs. I think that was one of them as well. But
Good. So
I feel
yeah,
like I have
so
a pretty good grasp on those now. I don't know if you want to go through those or not, but I think I've got a pretty good grasp on those now.
okay. Yeah, what else?
Another one was normal takeoff and climb as it relates to VX and VY, and then takeoff or soft field takeoff and climb as it relates to ground effect.
Okay. So how about yeah, what is VX and VY?
So VX is the best angle of climb. We use that for short field takeoff to get up over our 50-foot obstacle. And then Y is best rate of climb. So that is going to be the airspeed that's set for that will get us up to a certain altitude in the least amount of time.
Nice. And then you said, okay, so was it soft field or short field takeoff?
Soft field takeoff and climb as it relates to ground effect.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, when we do a soft field takeoff, what's the goal? What's the kind of the number one goal on a soft field takeoff?
So on a soft field takeoff, the goal is to get up airborne as quickly as possible. That way we avoid any potential hazards that are on this soft field.
And then do we want to take into any consideration anything of the nose wheel?
Yes, but we want to get the nose wheel up as quickly as possible. So we're just riding the mains until we're able to get airborne.
Right. You want to take weight off that so it doesn't like stick in the mud or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, so yeah, you can, let's say, rotate speed is, let's say it's 60, but you can actually get airborne at 55, 50 knots. What is happening? Why can you get airborne before the recommended, takeoff
Mhm.
speed?
Yeah. So that's due to ground effect. So the induced drag that you're creating on the plane is creating downdraft essentially, but it has nowhere to go. And so it turns that downdraft into lift. And then if you get airborne with that lift, but as you start to climb out of that ground effect, you will lose that lift.
Right. So when you're close to the ground, you get some added performance that allows you to kind of take off. And then, so yeah, I guess what do you want to do when you take off from soft field? All right, because we want to take off early and then we want to get into ground effect. What kind of is the procedure after that?
Yeah. So once we get into ground effect, we want to maintain that and keep that going until we reach a state speed, which would be VY. So let's say for my airplane, that's 70, 76. So we're gonna stay in ground effect and keep flying straight level until we hit that 76 knots, and then we start to climb out at that rate.
Nice. And do you know about how high above the ground effect starts?
So it starts, I think, one width of your wingspan.
Nice. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And then it
let's say
gets
my
more and
wingspan 30 feet. Yeah, as you start to get closer to the ground, the effect gets greater. It's exponential.
nice. Good. So I pulled up my kind of our ground school taxiway and runway lighting systems quiz. I'll just ask you a couple on there. Color our taxiway center line lights.
Center line, they green.
Yes. And then what happens when they start to turn yellow or they start to alternate green, yellow, green, yellow, green, yellow?
That means you're coming up to the end of it.
Yeah. So you're approaching a runway, right? Yeah. Good. Okay. Let's see here. What's another good one? So you have a 2-bar VASI, all right, and you got white, white. So one row of white, one row of white. What does that mean when you're coming into land?
That means you're above the glide slope.
Nice. And then what if you had a 3-bar VASI? What would be 2 red rows and 1 white row? What would that mean?
That would mean that you're below the glide slope.
Right, you're slightly below, or you're on the
Yeah.
lower glide slope because sometimes they'll have multiple kind of glide slopes. They want more so IFR traffic to follow, depending on the size of your aircraft. But good. Let me see one more here. What lights are used to increase the visibility of hold short and taxiway intersection lines on the pavement surface? So like like the hold short when you're coming up to the
Yeah.
runway, sometimes they might have actual lights on there.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's a tough one. But those are clearance bar lights. All right, let's continue
Okay.
on to
Are
different.
those are they actually on or in the pavement, or are they off the side lighting up the pavement?
I think clearance bars are on the pavement,
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah. All right, but what other is that all of them or no? That's not all of them, right?
No, they're navigation systems and radar services. So ground-based navigation, orientation, course determination, equipment test, and regulations.
Okay.
So
Okay.
ground-based navigation being VOR stuff, I think.
Yeah. So how do you test your VOR?
Yeah, that's a good one.
How do you make sure?
Uh,
So let's say you're on the ground, right? You're not flying yet, and you want to make sure your VOR's instrument's working.
yeah, there's a ground test you can do, but I'm not sure what it is.
Okay, yeah, no worries. It's called yeah, so there's VOT, it's a VOR test signal. So you would dial that into it and then into your nav radio and connect your VOR. And then I believe it's I always forget this, but I believe you if it's working, you want to see 182 or 360 from. Don't quote me on that. Look that up, but basically wherever you are in the airport, that's what you should have, and that tells you your at least your stuff in the aircraft is working. When you get into IFR stuff, there's more things to check the sensitivity of your VOR, but they don't really teach that in too much in private pilot. But what about if you're flying around, like you said you were going to use that York VOR or whatever? How do you know that ground-based station is actually working?
So I tune into it, and I'm pretty sure, like on the charts and stuff, I think there's points that they have based around it that you can look up in the supplement that'll tell you exactly this bar on this radial, and this is where you would do your test to see how active that is.
Yeah, so
And
there's
supposed to
VOR.
be within a couple degrees of variation.
Yeah, so those are VOR checkpoints, and you're right that that's true. But I was kind of thinking like just something not particularly that, just to make sure that it's operational, that it's not like turned off, it's not under maintenance.
We could tune into the frequency and check for the Morse code
Yeah, there you go.
on.
Yeah, perfect. All right, what else?
That's about it. We've covered the other one. The other one was night preparation, so lighting systems at the airport. Covered some of those. Yes, I think that's about it.
All right, well, I think you would definitely pass. So the oral, so I think you're set up good. I would give you a pass if it were me, but I'm not a DPE. But yes, I think hopefully I say you taking notes. So I think there were some recommendations I had in there for you. Just shore up those
Uh,
areas and maybe comb through your route, to see what are some other type of hazards or things they
yeah.
might ask that we're gonna fly through, because sometimes they specifically choose these routes so that they can ask you questions around the stuff you're gonna fly through. So just looking at yours, it's okay. It's special airspace, the MOA. It's it's that obstacle you flew over. It's the Tersa. It's like maybe those military training routes we talked about, that type of stuff. So, but yeah, good job.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no problem. And you're cool if I like put this on our YouTube and
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah, of course.
All right,
Yep.
awesome. Yeah, I don't know if I told you, but I did this before with another student and it didn't record. So I was like, no.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, good job. Keep me updated on your check ride. I'm interested to see how it goes. I'm sure you'll do great. So one other tip I have is to chair fly, to kind of sit in a chair and visualize the practical
Uh-huh.
portion. You even just go through your checklist and just visualize it going well. Visualize you nailing those landings. I'm a big believer in visualization. So, and that's what I
Uh-huh.
did on mine and I passed. So not saying that was the only reason, but it helped. So,
Yeah, definitely. Awesome.
all right,
Cool. I
man.
appreciate it.
Yeah, and reach out if you have any questions or anything. Happy to help and good luck.